He spent his childhood as a hostage, his manhood as a vassal, and 60 years watching more powerful men destroy themselves. When he finally became shogun, every rival he had ever feared was already dead. How does a man outlast an entire age? He became shogun at 60, the oldest first-time ruler in Japanese history. Every rival he had ever feared was already dead. Was it genius or 50 years of patience that no one else was willing to endure? In 1543, Tokugawa Ieyasu was born Matsudaira Takechiyo in Okazaki Castle in the small province of Mikawa. The Matsudaira were a minor clan, caught between two giants, the Oda to the west and the Imagawa to the east. His father, Matsudaira Hirotada, died when Takechiyo was just 6 years old, leaving his son as the fragile heir to a fragile house. In the politics of 16th century Japan, a fatherless boy in a weak clan was not a future lord. He was a bargaining chip, and everyone around him knew it.
At the age of 6, Takechiyo was sent as a diplomatic hostage, a common practice in an age when alliances were bought with children. He never arrived. Oda forces intercepted his escort party and carried him to Nagoya, where he spent 3 years in the household of Oda Nobuhide, Nobunaga's father. He was not mistreated. He was, in effect, a guest held against his father's behavior. 3 years in the enemy's house, learning how a more powerful lord lived. The lessons were not wasted. They were stored carefully for later.
In 1547, Takechiyo was delivered to Sunpu, the seat of Imagawa Yoshimoto, one of the most powerful warlords in eastern Japan. He would remain there for 12 years. Under the tutelage of the brilliant monk strategist Sesai Choro, he received an education in military tactics, political philosophy, and the management of men that few samurai of his era could equal. He was a hostage, yes, but he was also a student. By the time he left at 17, he had spent his entire childhood studying power from inside a cage. He knew exactly what he was looking at. On a stormy afternoon in 1560, everything changed. At the Battle of Okehazama, Oda Nobunaga launched a surprise attack on Imagawa Yoshimoto's massive army and killed the Imagawa lord himself. The most powerful patron Takechiyo had ever known was gone in an afternoon. The Imagawa alliance collapsed, and Takechiyo, 17 years old, was suddenly free, or as free as a minor lord in a war-torn land could be. He renamed himself Tokugawa Ieyasu, claimed descent from the ancient Minamoto line, and began returning to Okazaki. For the first time in his life, he was going home. In 1562, Ieyasu concluded the Kiyosu alliance with Oda Nobunaga, a partnership that would define the next 2 decades of his life. The arrangement was not between equals. Nobunaga was ambitious, expanding, transforming warfare itself. Ieyasu was useful, a steady, reliable commander who could hold Nobunaga's eastern flank. He fought at Nobunaga's direction, ceded political credit, absorbed losses that Nobunaga could not spare. For 20 years, he was the indispensable ally who never threatened to become the dominant partner. He watched, learned, and waited. That restraint was not weakness. It was calculation.
While serving Nobunaga, Ieyasu was simultaneously consolidating his own base in Mikawa. The province was inflamed by the Iko-Iki, armed Buddhist peasant leagues who defied feudal authority and had defeated armies larger than Ieyasu's. Some of his most trusted retainers were Iko-Iki members. The war lasted 2 years and tore families apart. When it ended, Ieyasu had broken the movement's power and emerged with what he needed most: an army of men who had followed him into fire and come through the other side. His domain, at last, was genuinely his.
In 1573, Ieyasu faced the one man who might have ended his story early. Takeda Shingen, commanding perhaps the finest cavalry army in Japan, was marching westward when Ieyasu, badly outnumbered, left his castle to confront him at Sekigahara. The result was catastrophe. His army shattered. Ieyasu fled back to Hamamatsu Castle, barely ahead of the Takeda advance. He later had a portrait painted to capture the shame of that moment, a reminder he carried for the rest of his life. He would not fight on unfavorable ground again.
The most terrible price came in 1579. Oda Nobunaga demanded that Ieyasu execute his own wife and eldest son. Lady Tsukiyama and Nobuyasu had allegedly conspired with the Takeda, the alliance's greatest enemy. The evidence was thin. The real reason was political. Nobunaga wanted to test Ieyasu's loyalty and remove a potential threat. Ieyasu obeyed. Lady Tsukiyama was killed. Nobuyasu was forced to commit suicide at 21 years old. The man who would one day rule Japan first paid for that future with the people he loved most.
In 1582, Ieyasu was in Sakai when word arrived that Oda Nobunaga was dead, assassinated at Honnoji by his own general Akechi Mitsuhide. The news came with a warning. Mitsuhide's army was hunting Nobunaga's allies. Ieyasu was trapped, far from his domain, with only a small personal guard. What followed was a desperate flight through the Iga Mountains, aided by local guides and Hattori Hanzo's shinobi network. He survived. Once home, he did not mourn Nobunaga publicly. He did not celebrate either. He began calculating.
After Honnoji, Ieyasu moved to claim territory in Kai and Shinano, left ungoverned by Nobunaga's death. But a new power was rising faster than anyone expected. Toyotomi Hideyoshi had already avenged his lord and was consolidating Japan at breathtaking speed. When conflict came, at the Battle of Komaki Nagakute in 1584, Ieyasu scored a tactical victory, killing 2 of Hideyoshi's finest generals and stalling his advance. But he could read the tide. Hideyoshi was absorbing Japan. The only question was whether Ieyasu would join willingly or be destroyed. In 1586, Tokugawa Ieyasu traveled to Osaka and knelt before Toyotomi Hideyoshi. No battlefield defeat had forced him there. No siege had broken his walls. He chose submission, a calculation so cold it bordered on art. In exchange for loyalty and abandoned independence, he received security and time. Hideyoshi, who understood talent, gave him the entire Kanto region in 1590, moving him from the political center, ostensibly a promotion, practically an exile. Ieyasu took his army to the mudflats of Edo and began building. He was 47 years old. He was nowhere near finished.
Edo in 1590 was little more than a fishing village surrounded by swamp. Hideyoshi had intended the relocation as neutralization, removing Ieyasu from the political center by burying him in undeveloped wilderness. Instead, Ieyasu launched what may be the greatest infrastructure project in samurai history. He drained the swamps, diverted rivers, built roads and port facilities, and settled his retainers across the region. While the Toyotomi court glittered in Osaka, Ieyasu was quietly building something that would outlast any palace. A foundation, a future. Exactly what he always built, quietly, deliberately, for later. When Toyotomi Hideyoshi died in September 1598, he left behind a 5-year-old heir and 5 regents sworn to protect him. Ieyasu was one of them, and also, immediately, the most dangerous. Within months, he began making strategic marriage alliances explicitly forbidden by Hideyoshi's deathbed compact. His rivals accused him of betrayal. His allies rallied to him. Japan was dividing itself, slowly and then all at once, into 2 camps. Ieyasu did not cause the conflict that was coming. He simply made certain that when it arrived, he would be ready.
On October 21st, 1600, at the crossroads of Sekigahara, the 2 halves of Japan collided. The Western coalition faced Ieyasu's eastern forces across a fog-covered valley. The battle lasted 6 hours. It turned not on tactics alone, but on betrayal. Kobayakawa Hideaki's sudden defection collapsed the western flank and triggered a general rout. When the killing was done, 80,000 men lay dead or scattered across the field. Tokugawa Ieyasu, 57 years old, had won. After a lifetime of waiting, calculating, and absorbing, the moment he had prepared for had finally arrived.
In 1603, the emperor appointed Tokugawa Ieyasu Shogun of Japan. He was 59 years old. The boy who had been sent as a hostage at 6, who had kneeled before 2 more powerful lords, who had executed his own wife and son, who had watched Nobunaga burn and Hideyoshi conquer, had simply outlasted them both. 2 years later, he abdicated in favor of his son, Hidetada, making the hereditary nature of Tokugawa power unmistakable. The waiting was done. The dynasty was established. Japan would not see another civil war for 2.5 centuries.
What made Ieyasu different was not speed or brilliance. Nobunaga was the visionary.
Hideyoshi was the genius. Ieyasu was the survivor. The man who understood that in a long enough game, the most dangerous weapon is not a sword, but a calendar. He absorbed defeats. He accepted humiliations. He swallowed grief. He spent decades making himself indispensable to men who would never have made him their equal. And when they were gone, by assassination, by ambition, by the chaos they themselves created, he was simply still there, waiting, building, ready. The cost, of course, was extraordinary. A childhood without freedom, a manhood defined by service to men he had to pretend to follow, a wife he ordered killed, a son he watched die. And yet, when historians examine what Ieyasu actually built, the accounting shifts. The Edo period he created lasted 250 years. It brought literacy, urbanization, and a long peace to a population that had known only war for a century. Perhaps no generation suffers quite as much for the next as the one that finally ends the fighting. Ieyasu understood this. He paid the price willingly. Next time on Samurai Chronicles, 400 years before Ieyasu, another warrior blazed across Japan's battlefields and was destroyed by the very brother who used him. The betrayal that shattered Japan's greatest hero begins. If the patience of a lifetime speaks to you, subscribe and stay with us for every new episode. Ieyasu waited 50 years. You only have to wait until tomorrow.